Many of the popular franchises in the NFL have developed awesome logos. In fact, there are some of the most iconic logos in all of professional sports. I'd put up the Pittsburgh Steelers emblem or the Dallas Cowboys star against damn near any other team across sports. I'm talking New York Yankees, Los Angeles Lakers kind of popular. But Pittsburgh and Dallas aside, there's one other team in the NFL whose logo is practically synonymous with the NFL itself, and that is the distinct, unique, and utterly famous Green Bay Packers G. There is, however, something unique about the Packers logo that none of the other teams that were mentioned before have to contend with, and that's the fact that there are two other prominent sports teams using it. Obviously, if you go around the country, I'm sure you can find some local youth football teams sporting the Cowboy star or some high school team that features something similar. But in the case of the Green Bay Packers, they actually have two prominent universities that use an indisputably similar G: Grambling State and, of course, the University of Georgia. And you know why they seem so similar? Well, that's because they actually are the same. Or at least as close to the same as you could get. At different points in their histories, the two universities actually reached out to the Packers for permission to use their G, a request that was received surprisingly well by Green Bay. Who would have thought that an NFL team would be doling out its intellectual property all willy-nilly? I know this took place decades back, but it's not like the league's rigid business culture all started yesterday. On the other hand, although the two universities are obviously very well known throughout the country, it isn't like the Packers are necessarily direct competitors with them, so I guess it isn't overwhelmingly surprising that such a precise overlap has lasted this long. Let's take a look back at the origins of what's affectionately known as the Oval G and check out the real reason that the University of Georgia and Grambling State made their own slight alterations to it for their own usage. The legendary green and yellow G that you can find embroidered on every kind of Packers memorabilia imaginable dates all the way back to 1961, when Packers Hall of Fame head coach Vince Lombardi decided it was time for his program to have a new official team logo. He asked the team's equipment manager, George Brasher, who the team lovingly referred to as Dad, to design the new logo. Brasher tasked his assistant, John Gordon, who was an art student at a small local school called St. Norbert College, with the responsibility of designing and creating a new logo for the football team. After a series of trials, Gordon presented his original rendition of the Green Bay G, which was shifted into a welcoming oval shape that was supposed to relate back to the shape of the football. Gordon and Brasher showed their masterpiece to Lombardi, who then approved the work. And just like that, one of the most iconic images in all of sports was born. Despite numerous claims that the G was supposed to have some symbolic connection to greatness, that was reported incorrectly by a variety of outlets. Another interesting piece of trivia to note is that while today's Packers logo has a thin golden line that traces the outside of the G, that wasn't actually added until 1980. The original logo, designed in '61, was just the dark green shading around the borders of the white G. So now you found yourself wondering, wait, where does the University of Georgia or Grambling State come into play? Surprisingly, it didn't take all that long for this connection to form. According to the University of Georgia athletic website, in 1963, shortly after he was hired to be the latest Bulldogs head coach, Vince Dooley decided that his new regime needed a new look, and he began redesigning the university's jerseys. For the new uniforms ahead of the 1964 season, he went with a red helmet with a black G on a white background as the dominant feature. The only matter left to decide was the team's logo. Fortunately, he had just hired a former Georgia player named John Donaldson as an assistant coach. And as luck would have it, John's wife, Ann, had received her BFA in commercial art from Georgia, and he volunteered her services. John agreed with Coach Dooley that a fresh look could be a big help when it came to sharpening the team's look, which might make the university a more attractive choice for some recruits going forward. So Ann, perhaps with more than a little bit of inspiration from the Green Bay Packers logo, started out designing the school's new emblem. Dooley was a big fan of the color scheme and the shaping that she presented him, but he, of course, being a man of sport, realized that it was incredibly similar to the Green Bay Packers logo. So he had the school's athletic director, Joel Eves, call and ask permission to use the design. The Packers brass had no issue with it, and just like that, the second football-shaped G was approved for business. Although, maybe the Packers shouldn't have agreed, at least not without receiving anything in exchange. Because the amount of money that the University of Georgia has made off that logo is insane. Georgia is a top 5 seller among clients of a collegiate licensing company, the oldest and largest licensing representative in the nation year in and year out. And of course, that red and black G is stamped on damn near everything they sell. It is, however, fun to think about this, a top-tier Division I football program calling up an NFL team to use its intellectual property. This just goes to show how different everything used to be. Nowadays, with the bundles of money that are at stake, you'd have to think that it could be a cold day in hell before a pro football team forked over something as valuable as its logo without receiving any compensation in return. Imagine the look on Jerry Jones' face if he got a call from the athletic director at Alabama, and for some reason they wanted to change their logo to the iconic cowboy star. Just about the only way he would agree to that is if he got Nick Saban as his head coach in return. Now, before we move on to Grambling State, we do need to address something here. There have been some rumors going around the internet that the Green Bay G was brought to Athens by a former Georgia running back named Tommy Towns. And allegedly, after he was unable to snag a roster spot, one of the Packers equipment managers gave him a bag of Packers gear, including a helmet sticker, which he put on the back of his car. Then the story gets really murky. There may or may not have been a lengthy chain of communication that may or may not have played into getting the G from the back of Towns' Thunderbird to the sides of Georgia's helmets, but from what we can tell, this appears to be more of an urban legend than anything else. I mean, after all, the story gets into all sorts of chance encounters and wild characters, people named Forrest who go by Spec, and of course a former equipment manager named Pap. So yeah, if you ask me, this has all the makings of an urban legend. Anyway, back to the Grambling State iteration of the football-shaped G logo. This, my friend, is the most controversial installment of the G out there to date. Not because there's anything wrong with Grambling or because they took it without the Packers' permission or anything like that, but rather because of what has happened around the logo in the time since. Hold that thought though, we'll get to it. Grambling State introduced its own version of the Green Bay Packers G in 1974, when they introduced a slightly elongated mustard and black colored G, in that strange weird shape that is strangely reminiscent of a power button. While the school itself is rich with tradition, both in terms of culture and sports, having notable alumni like Buck Buchanan and Doug Williams, who would go on to have tremendous success in the NFL, the story behind its adaptation of the football-shaped G is rather understated. But that doesn't mean there aren't a boatload of former players and alumni that feel some type of way about the symbol. And this became abundantly clear when the school made some news in the mid-2000s. Once discussions surfaced that they might be looking to change the design of their longtime logo, because for decades they were unable to acquire the trademark and thus had no legal way to make anyone else pay for using it. As impossible as that sounds, it's true. In fact, the school hadn't even applied for a trademark on the Oval G logo until January of 1997, and it was turned down just over a year later because the design was too close to previously registered trademarks. Oh, how I wonder what trademarks the office could have stumbled upon that were similar to Grambling's. Anyway, despite not being able to acquire the rights to their own logo, it was still very popular amongst the fan base, the alumni, and of course, the former players. And to many of the former players, it was more than just a logo or the uniforms. It was a powerful symbol of what they accomplished on the field with their teammates. Or, in this case, to a coach, like Larry Wright, the school's basketball coach, who also played for the team back in the early 70s and believed that the school was essentially selling out by changing the logo for profits. "The G is legendary," said Wright. "It goes right along with Eddie Robinson, Ralph Waldo Emerson Jones, Fred Hopdy. So when you talk about that and the history of the school, there will have to be some economic decision involved in changing it. And as I understand it, there is." It is worth noting that not everyone was diehard in their defense of the school's logo. Some of the more ornery type of folks, like Doug Williams, didn't seem all too broken up about the idea of his former school changing the logo that he once proudly donned on game day. Williams, the Grambling quarterback who went on to win a Super Bowl in the NFL with the Washington Redskins before returning to his alma mater to coach, explained that he didn't always necessarily share that sentiment. "Back in the day, that wasn't important to us at all," said Williams. "Uniforms and fanciness were not important. That's basically what made Grambling what it is. We were plain. We just had a good product on the field." However, after seeing the effect that the school had on its community and what the symbol really stood for, once he had an opportunity to work for the school in the football program as the team's head coach from 1998 until 2003, Williams admitted that his perspective had changed since his days wearing the Grambling colors on the field. And when the school had started to pressure him, as the head coach, to support a logo change, he reportedly said, "I told them back then, you can change it, but we're not going to put it on the helmet." Then there are guys like Erling Hunter, once a local kid who grew up watching Grambling State games, that would go on to graduate from the school in 1998. He said the proposed new logo would be okay in his book, despite the fact that the original logo is quite literally a part of his being. "I like the fact that the new logo could incorporate the tiger mascot, and that it does not completely abandon the traditional Grambling G," Hunter said. "Although I love the G and even have a tattoo of that emblem on my right arm, I still have no objection to the change." Alright, listen. All I'm saying is that if I had a tattoo of my school's logo on my arm, and they tried to change it up on me, I'd be a little bit ticked off. Well, much of the noise around Grambling changing its logo has quieted in recent years. Surely, when some new hotshot athletic director comes in, the talk will resurface. But I guess that's what happens when you're the third team to the party. There's a reason we don't see all this hubbub surrounding the Packers or the Bulldogs version of the Oval G. But hey, which sports team logo is your favorite? Join us in that comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton, and hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea, because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.